Hiya. Sorry, let me just mess around with this. Oh yeah, that's okay. All right, you can hear me okay, presumably. Oh, hiya, Heather. See, oh, hi, Katie. Hello.
Do you want our sounds on or off?
Sounds off, but you can,
And
oh,
video
hi,
on.
there's Jules. But by all means, angle your camera so I can see.
Okay, sound off, video on.
Yeah. Yeah, so by all means have your, what am I trying to say? By all means have your video turned on and just angled towards you, and then I might stand a chance of seeing you. Is that Alex? There's Al. Hiya, Al. But yeah, probably as Barry and Em and Sally. Hiya, Jackie. But just have your sound off. Oh, there's Chris. There's Osman. Hiya. Is that there?
Unmute. Hi.
Hello, you right?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good, thank you. How's your day been? Okay.
Yeah, good. Same as every day. We're saying it's a bit like Groundhog Day here.
Yeah, I know, but at least the weather's getting nicer.
Yes, exactly. Oh.
I was going to message you actually. Do you want to borrow that Call of the Wild, the film about trees?
Oh yes, please. That would be amazing.
I'll do a drop when I do the dog.
Okay. Are you able to do tomorrow?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Tomorrow afternoon, if that's okay.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
No
yeah. This is working. We came to a different place, so we've got the better Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, as long as I can. I mean, I need to probably play around with it to get bigger Oh, in fact, I can do that. Bigger pictures of everyone. But there you go.
Are we on?
Oh, there you go. I can see everyone a bit better now. Okay, so
I'm going to mute then.
Yeah, mute yourself, and then if anyone else joins us, they'll just join in. Oh, there you go, Sharon. You found us. Brilliant, and Al's dog's joining in as well. Lovely. Okay, all of you. Shall we come down to lie on our backs? I probably don't actually need to move because I'm just going to sit here and talk for a little bit. And I'll be able to see you guys, or ladies and gents, moving instead. Hello. Oh, there's Jen. Is that Jen? Hiya, I can see you, Jen.
Hi.
Hiya.
Sorry, everybody must have seen me and be like, no idea who I was.
No, I saw the surname and I thought, aha.
The younger version.
You managed to make it work anyway. That's great.
Yeah, well, my technical expert.
Brilliant. Well, you can leave your video on if you want, if you're happy to, and then I can see you. But just turn your.
The only thing is, our video faces towards a wall because we've actually got this projector on our TV screen.
Oh, fine. Well, you're welcome to turn it off then, and then just mute yourself. But I'll know you're there.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, no worries. Okay, so a few more of you have joined. So, well, yeah, lovely. I'm so pleased we can still do this, and it's nice to be able to see some of you as well. So just make yourselves comfortable in a supine position. That's hilarious because I can see Al's dog sniffing around her. Fortunately, I don't have children or a cat in here at the moment, but there is always time for that to change. But just lie in a supine position, so the corpse pose, really, unless you need to bend your knees, in which case do bend your knees and just bring your feet flat to the mat. But just make sure you're comfortable however you're lying, so have a little wiggle around. And just closing the eyes if you can, so you can begin to internalize awareness. And just turn in on yourself, perhaps for the first time today. I know everyone's going through their own challenges at the moment and different levels of busyness or quietness. But just notice your body initially. So really important just to notice the body. the solidity of your body and your body in contact with the earth beneath you. So just having a real sense of being held. I keep talking about this, but I think it's really important that we have that sense of being held by something. And as long as we don't have an earthquake, then there is like a stability to the earth beneath us. And then just notice how you're feeling within the body as well. So I know a few people I've been talking to are having body issues at the moment. It's almost like, yeah, things are coming up for them in the body as things come up for them mentally and emotionally as well. So check in also with how you're feeling generally within yourself. So I know, you know, that people are on a bit of an emotional roller coaster, it seems, at the moment. Some days are good and some days are not so good, and some days you get caught out by an emotion that you weren't expecting, and the fear creeps in again, and then there's the anxiety, and then all of a sudden everything's fine again. I think it depends how much you check in with the news, actually. But just noticing what's happening for you. And then let's just bring the awareness to the breath. So just noticing your breath initially, and as I say, regularly. Once we start noticing the breath, it starts changing. So it's almost difficult to be a silent observer of our breath. But nonetheless, just noticing the breath as we start to become perhaps a little bit more intimate with the breath. So we notice not so much the quality of the breath, but where the breath is going in the body, where you're breathing into and what you're breathing in from. So the apparatus to an extent. But then just starting to perhaps collect more breath into your lungs. So without stressing or straining in any way, inviting more breath in so that you become even more observant and intimate with the breath. So the breath coming in through the nose if that's possible. And you'll notice how the rib cage might expand to accommodate the increase in the breath coming into the body. And how the rib cage will contract, or the little muscles between your ribs will contract, and the diaphragm as you release the breath from the body. So you notice the inhalation and you begin to notice more of your exhalation. And it might be that you feel more comfortable with your inhalation than you do with your exhalation. And then you start to notice how different the two breaths really are. So the inhalation has its role to play in the breath, the cycle of the breath then, and your exhalation also has its role to play. And yet there's a relationship between the two. So whilst they're very different in terms of what they're actually achieving and what they're actually doing and how they're actually being, there is a relationship between them. You almost couldn't have one without the other. And it's a bit like the body. So it's not that we just have the front and the back and the sides. You need that relationship between them all. And just noticing more the depth of the breath, where the breath goes when it comes into the body. Which part of the lungs are touched by the breath. And I know that's difficult to know sometimes, but the more you can keep honing your awareness on the breath, the more you'll have an idea of that. Noticing where the breath comes from on your exhalation. And then we'll try and maintain an awareness on the breath, on the fullness of the breath. So not thinking of it necessarily as the front of the breath and the back of the breath, but literally the fullness of the breath. And it's as if the breath is held within this container, the rib cage. And it's not just that you've got a front to your rib cage and a back to your rib cage, but you've got sides as well that make the whole. And it's very three-dimensional, isn't it? So just being aware of that as well. So the breath within the rib cage. And we'll start to bring movement into the body, and as always, and it's more challenging, I suppose, because I can't actually see in any depth what any of you are doing, so please just be really mindful of what you are doing and how that's impacting on your body and how you're feeling, so stop at any point. But let's just lift the legs away from the mat, and let's let the knees come in towards the chest, about hip distance apart from one another initially. But with a sense, and I don't mean for the knees to actually come into touch, but with a sense of the knees kind of rolling a little bit in towards one another from within the hip joints. So there's a little internal rotation, if that means anything to you. So the knees in towards the chest with this slight internal rotation from the hip joints. And then almost allow the top of the thigh bone, so remember the hip joint, ball and socket joint, allow the head of the femur of the thigh bones to almost sink deeper into your hip joints. And actually, as you do that, just bring the knees actually up away from your chest, as if you were going to bring the feet down onto the mat, only you're not going to bring them down onto the mat. You're going to keep the knees bent, but you're just drawing the knees a little bit away from your chest and your thighs away from your tummy, and allowing your lower back to round away from the mat in the process. And notice how that might encourage not only the thigh bones to drop deeper in the hip joints, but the lower back to round away from the mat, and just hover there with the feet away from the mat, the knees still bent, but the knees a little bit away, as if you were trying to bring them sort of perpendicular to the floor. If that, I think that's right. And then we'll keep that. So we'll keep the lower back rounding away from the mat. So I don't mean like the sacrum, the bony triangle bit, that stays on the mat. It's the little bit above there, maybe all the way back up to your mid-back. And then connecting with the ball of the toes, and with this awareness of this slight internal rotation through the hip joints, start to lift the ball of the toes towards the ceiling, but not in a really like quick, aggressive manner. You want to keep a little bend in the knees, so there's like a softness and yet a buoyancy in the knee joints. And think about the knee joints again as not just being front and back, but being like round almost. And just feel that deepening. So let the thigh bones settle even deeper into your hip joints as the lower back comes away from the mat. And the ball of the toes face towards the ceiling. And then just take your knees even further forward towards the front of the mat. So literally you do have like a 90-degree angle. It's probably not because your lower back is lifting away from the mat. But in theory, there's a 90-degree angle between the base of your torso there and your thighs. And then bend the knees so that the heels come to knee height. So bend the knees so your heels come to knee height. And then just extend your hands, lift your hands away from the mat, and just bring the hands above the shoulders, as if you were reaching your hands to the ceiling, but actually you're going to do the opposite of that. The hands are lifted, but draw the top of the arm bones into the torso a little bit more down towards the earth. But then at the same time as drawing the arm bones in, expand out through your shoulder joints and collect into the center of your hands. And in theory, we're kind of in an Utkatasana, depending on how you responded to those instructions. And I don't know if the word is instructions anyway, but it's difficult because you can't see me so easily without having to move. So anyway, we'll release on an exhalation. Knees can drop once again in towards the chest. And then we're just going to roll to the right side of the body and bring ourselves all the way up from here, coming into a cross-legged position towards the front of the mat. And I think so. I don't even know. The days have lost all meaning now. I've lost track of the days, but we have done this recently in one of the classes. So, Sukhasana, a comfortable cross-legged position. So crossing at the ankles. I was going to say probably it would be easier if we all had the same ankle in front. So sorry for those of you that aren't sitting this way, but if you just take your left ankle in front of your right ankle, so your left ankle is towards the front of your mat, as in it's closer towards the front of the mat than the right ankle. Flex into your feet. And then just have a sense of the sitting bones going backwards behind you. So maybe you just almost walk more so onto the front of your sitting bones, and take your hands, the palms of your hands to your outer knees. and collecting the palms of the hands towards the outer knees. Draw your knees a little bit, like a millimetre, in towards one another. But while the hands are trying to collect the inner knees in towards one another, the knees are resisting that and almost drawing apart from one another, okay? And as you do that, so as you press the hands into the outer knees, press the outer knees into the palms of hands, in theory, that might take you much deeper into your shoulders. You might feel your shoulders broadening, and it might take you deeper into your sacrum as well. So try and maintain that action so the knees are not quite sinking down to the mat, and bring your hands forward ahead of you. Come onto your fingertips, and it's quite strong. You can probably feel that in your hip joints already because you're not allowing the knees to drop towards the earth. Maybe take a breath in here, and as you breathe out, it might be that you can just bring your tummy and chest down a little bit towards your front, well, towards your legs. And then from there, we're going to draw the right knee in towards the chest, and you can move your hands to accommodate this movement, and then bring the right leg behind the back of the body, coming into pigeon. So straight into pigeon, I'm afraid, sorry. So the right top of foot goes flat to the mat. Have a sense of that little subtle internal rotation through your right hip joint, as if you were rolling your inner thigh in towards the middle of the mat. And flex into your left foot. And notice, try and bring a little bit more buoyancy, sense of being alive in your left knee. So there's some action in the left knee, which will take you deeper into your left hip. And almost as if you were internally rotating through that left hip, drawing into towards the midline. And then from there, maybe you just keep your hands on the mat, or you might take a breath in, and as you breathe out, the tummy and chest coming down towards the earth. But equally, if that doesn't feel right, don't go for it. And maybe your head rests on your hands, if that feels okay. So those of you that aren't so familiar with this posture, it can be quite intense. That's Sally. Lovely, Katie. So think about that little subtle rolling in of your inner thighs. I know it's difficult because you've got, but also notice actually how you have two legs doing two different things right now. So you're asking two different things of your legs and noticing how they're doing that, the two different things. And then notice what's going on with the breath and what's going on with your shoulders and with your chest, and if you've collapsed the chest or whether you still maintain that container for your lungs. Okay, so you've not just sunk the chest down towards the earth and then sort of squished the lungs almost in the process. I know that's not necessarily like technically correct, but nonetheless just the idea of it. And then we'll take a breath in from here. And come back up onto your hands. And as you breathe out, let's just release, soften the left buttock towards the earth. And then let's bring the right leg all the way around. I think I've done that right, haven't I? I've gone the right way. And let's collect again into Sukhasana with the right ankle in front of the left, hopefully. And let's take the hands once again to the outer knees. And again, that awareness of almost the outer knees pressing lightly into the palms of the hands, but the palms of the hands drawing the outer knees in towards one another, and maybe that takes you deeper into your shoulders. So just notice that, what it does to your shoulders, and notice what it does to your armpits, and notice the rib cage as well, and notice the fullness of your head, and notice perhaps as you bring your chest forward a little bit, your tummy and chest coming forward, that might take you deeper into your sacrum. So keep settling the rib cage down. And then from there, we'll take the hands wherever we need to so that we can bring the right knee up towards the chest. And take the left knee up towards the chest. I was doing it and saying the wrong one. And take the left leg behind you. Okay, and then this little internal rotation as if you were rolling the outer thigh in towards the middle of the mat. And the same to an extent with the right leg as well, with the right hip. And then we'll take a breath in here, and as you breathe out, maybe you come forward onto your forearms. And just think about what you're doing and how you're placing yourself. So maintain the lightness within the chest as much as possible. And the spaciousness within the armpits, and the broadness of the shoulders, and the connection of the rib cage with the pelvis. Okay, so don't try and stretch forward necessarily. If anything, collect more in towards your center. And notice that back foot on the earth. That's it. Lovely, that's it, Sharon, good. And still following the breath as best you can. And then we'll take a breath in from here to come back up onto our hands if we're not already there. And then we'll exhale the hands back, and we'll release now the right buttock down onto the mat. And bring the left foot forward in front of the right foot. So we come back into Sukhasana, a comfortable, well in theory anyway, comfortable cross-legged position, energize into your feet. And again, that sense of the sitting bones going back a little bit. So like the perineum faces more so towards the earth. And think about your thigh bones, going deep into your pelvis. Now it might be that you need help with your hands here, but I know we've done this a few times, some of you with me recently, but see if you can bring your chest forward a little bit and deepen back into your hips with your thigh bones as you come all the way up to stand from there. Oh, well done. I saw some of you doing that, brilliant. And then release your legs from there. And I'll turn to face you. So let's take the feet about hip distance apart, approximately. And just turn the big toes in ever so slightly, but do that action from the hip joints. It's not just the foot that's turning in, but the whole of your leg is turning in a tiny bit. And the same with the left side. So from the hip joint, the knees and the toes turn in, but like really subtly. And then take the weight forward onto the ball of the toes and feel like you're collecting into the center of your feet as you soften your heels on the earth. So the heels are just resting there and just bending deeper into the posture without losing the sense of being alive in your knees. So it's not a really like straight, aggressive bending of the knees. So there's a little lift through your inner ankle joints and inner knees. The buttocks stick out a little bit, I suppose, for want of a better way of explaining it. So this space, again, it's like quite intimate, I suppose. The perineum, the root of the spine faces the earth. And then let's take the hands out ahead of us. So in Utkatasana, okay, so the weight is on the front of the feet, more so. The heels are resting on the earth. There's a sense of buoyancy in the knee joints. And see if you can deepen your thigh bones in your hip joints. So draw the head of your thigh bones even deeper back behind you. And see how that draws you deeper into your sacrum. So maybe you feel that in your lower back as you draw up into your lower back and down into your lower back. And then draw the head of the arm bones deeper into your torso, into your shoulder joints. And at the same time, feel an expansion through the shoulders out towards the sides of the earth or the room. And then collect into the palms of your hands. So make your hands a bit more active. And then take a breath in here before all gets too much. And exhale your hands down onto the earth, keeping the knees bent initially. And just feeling the hands on the earth, the weight forward in the front of the feet. Just trace a line from the inner ankle joints all the way up towards your perineum and think about creating space there. So think about more space through the inner thighs as you start to open into the back of your knee joints, but again, nice and slowly, maintaining that just ever so slightly internal rotation. So it's a bit of a paradox because on the one hand, I'm asking you to roll the legs in towards one another, which might have a tendency to collapse you through your inner arches and through your inner knee joints. And at the same time as asking you to do that, I'm actually asking you to lift through the space between the ball of the big toe and the inner heel and through your inner knee joints all the way up into your nether regions, then your perineum. And then you might let your head kind of drop down towards the mat, but try not to actually let it drop. So it might face the crown of the head down towards the earth. But remember the fullness, the roundness of your skull, and just drawing that in towards your shoulders, really. So there's this connection of head and heart as much as possible. Your head's not out on a limb, so to speak. And just notice still, if you can, the broadness through the shoulders. So you might have to have your knees bent to facilitate that as well. So we're in Uttanasana, a standing forward fold, but we want to really collect into our center, so into our sort of back waist as much as anything else. And just noticing any resistance, where you feel resistance in the body, also in the mind, of course. So a standing forward fold, just inverting the head like this, can be really beneficial. But noticing how it's impacting on your ability to breathe with ease and whether you can still maintain that container, the fullness of the chest. And then we'll all soften into the knees actually. And again, we'll just take Utkatasana. So I say soften into the knees, bend the knees, keep the weight forward in the front of the feet, sticking the buttocks out a little bit, as if you were going to sit on a chair actually, that's at kind of knee height, so your buttocks will be at knee height. And then from there, so thigh bones deep back behind you as you lift your hands to about shoulder height and draw the top of the arm bones deeper back behind you as well. So almost as if your arms went behind you and your thighs went behind you. So there's a sense of being kind of collected in the center. And then we'll take a breath in, come all the way up from there with much relief, and exhale, release your hands. Take the weight over into your left foot. Come onto the ball of the right toes and turn the right knee towards the right, again from the hip joint towards the right side of the room. And then we're just going to lift the right foot away from the earth and lift, oh, she says, the right knee up towards the ceiling. And feel that deepening in the right hip joint before you guide the right foot in towards the left inner thigh for tree pose. But I mean, by all means, hold a wall if you need to for balancing purposes this evening. And try to avoid the right foot going to the inside of your left knee if at all possible. And just think about your pelvis, okay? So think about the spaciousness of your pelvis and the spaciousness within your rib cage as well, and the collecting of the two together. So the two have a relationship with one another. They're doing very different things. They are attached through the spine. Just noticing the connection, the relationship between them. There's definitely a relationship between the hips and the shoulders, and just feeling the spaciousness through the armpits. And your breath. Notice your breath. And see if you can bring a bit more softness into the buttocks, and see if you can almost allow more of the root of the spine to see the earth. And then on an exhalation, release your hands and release your right foot down onto the mat. And just take the weight more so into the front of the right foot, but collect into the center of the foot. Turn your left toes to the left side of the room and the left knee towards the left side of the room from the left hip. And then eyes focused on a spot ahead of you. Hold on to something if you need to as you start to lift your left foot away from the mat. And lift the left knee as much as you can as well. So there's this sense of deepening into the hip joint. And then your left hand might draw your left foot in towards your right inner thigh. That's it. And then if you've got your balance, bring your hands together at the heart. So again, there's that relationship now between your left foot and your right leg, like a seal almost. And don't worry if you fall out. Well done, all of you. I can see some very good balances here. The ease of the breath. Okay, and then on an exhalation, let's release the hands and let's release the left foot down onto the mat. And then we'll do something similar, but quite different, I suppose. It's a bit like coming into Utkatasana, but just, again, exploring the range of movement through your legs. So we've done this a few times recently, Garudasana. So we're going to bend into the left knee, a bit like we did. In fact, if we were to come through Utkatasana, so why don't we do that again? Let's bend both knees, actually. So the chair pose, like we've just done twice already. Sorry. Deepening the hip joint and deepening the thigh bones back into the hip joints. And then a little internal rotation, so this idea of drawing the legs in towards one another as you lift your right foot away from the mat. And literally you are going to draw the right thigh, center of thigh, across the left. But you want to, both legs need to turn in towards one another. So the left thigh also needs to turn in to meet the right thigh. So they're both turning in towards one another. And maybe your right foot hooks around your left ankle, but don't worry if that doesn't happen. But think more so about your thighs crossing as if they were hugging one another. And just deepening the thigh bones back again behind you. And let the ribcage settle down towards your lower back as your hands once again come to the heart. And it's a really tricky pose, so if you are struggling with it, don't worry. And then, because it is quite a tricky pose, again, just really draw the thighs in towards one another. And then take a breath in and release from there. And then we'll do the same on the other side. So we'll come into it through Utkatasana. But what actually we might do this time is just turn the big toes in towards one another a little. So the feet are still hip distance. But this idea of rolling the thighs already in towards one another. But sort of sit down in the posture. And so whilst the left thigh is absolutely turning in towards the right, you also need to have a sense of the right turning into the left. Lift your left foot up now. And again, see if you can wrap then the left leg, or at least it crosses the right thigh. And then maybe the left foot goes around the back of the right ankle. And the hands together at the heart. So thigh bones deep back behind you. Breath easeful, she says. All these lights, that's it. Keep the thighs rolling in towards one another. So keep rolling them in towards one another, deepening into that cross. And then we'll take a breath in and release from there. Fabulous. Okay, and then turning sideways on your mat. I can't even begin to think how I will explain that otherwise, because I'm already sideways on my mat. So turning sideways on your mat. And so it doesn't really matter. Maybe it doesn't matter actually. It doesn't matter which foot you've got at the front of the mat. We're just going to, again, turn the big toes in towards one another a little bit. Okay, so the heels are turned out a little bit. And again, that action comes from in the hip joints. So you're like literally rolling in towards one another. And then we might just have the hands down actually ahead of us. And we'll just take a breath in. And as you breathe out, we'll come into Prasarita Padottanasana, it's called. So your fingertips come down onto the mat. Now, I would suggest that we all just lift the heels away from the mat, come up onto the ball of the toes, and then bending into your knees, seeing how that might feel. It might feel quite kind of congested or tight up in your hip joints. So directing the sitting bones back from there, almost as if you were, again, trying to extend the thighs behind you. Then just rest your heels to the mat. Keep that lift through your inner feet and inner ankle joints. By all means, keep a bend in your knee joints. Certainly don't lock the knee joints, and keep some sense of being alive in them. And then you might take a breath in. And as you breathe out, think about lifting a little bit through your sitting bones and collecting more into your back waist. And then as a consequence of doing that, it might be your hands come down onto the mat so they can be flat to the mat. And then we might bring the head down towards the mat, but try not to sort of disconnect the head from the rest of the body. So feel a sense or encourage a sense of drawing the fullness of your skull towards your heart. Okay, as much as you can. And noticing the container of the rib cage and maintaining that. So not trying to flare the ribs, not trying to press the rib cage between the legs, but just focusing more so on the ball of the toes, the lifting through the inner knees and inner ankle joints, and then that deepening into your hip joints. And then as a consequence of that, it might be that your head, or at least your gaze, looks not just to the wall behind you, but maybe eventually up towards the ceiling behind your buttocks. How are we doing with that? That's it, Al. That's it. So be really alive in the feet. That's it. More alive in the ball of the toes. And then seeing if there's any way that you can, sometimes that's it, Jules. Sometimes it's helpful to actually bend the knees and almost deepen into the hips. That's it, Sharon. Oh, hi, Tabitha. Good. Lovely, all of you. So in theory, a nice calming pose, depending on what's going on for you in it. But this sense of rolling the inner thighs in towards one another. So just remember what it felt like in Garudasana, the eagle pose, where your thighs were crossed. And just trying to find that area on your thighs again, and almost, again, enacting that, but with the legs apart. And then from here, we'll take a breath in. Soften into the knees, bring the hands forward onto the mat ahead of us. Everyone bend the knees now. And as you breathe in, come all the way back up to stand. Try not to tuck the tailbone under and press the hips forward, so let the pubic bone drop down a little bit. And then turn, I suppose it doesn't matter, does it? I'm going to turn my right foot and lead with my right foot, but whichever foot is at the front of your mat, wherever the front of your mat is, we'll do it on both sides anyway. We're going to do Ardha Chandrasana, like literally there is a half moon out there at the moment. So we might need to step the back foot closer towards the front foot. And then your front foot, again, you just want to collect into the center of it from the baby toe side and the big toe side. And you want to be light on the ball of the toes, and you want the heel just to rest on the mat. And then take your right fingertips ahead of the right foot, but off to the right slightly. And separate into, not aggressively, but just space between sitting bones. Two legs doing different things right now. You're going to ask different things of them. So you're going to take a breath in, and you're going to lift your left foot away from the mat. Ball of the toes, connect in with the ball of the toes, and lift the ball of the toes, the foot, towards hip height. But rather than pressing, the leg is sort of straightening, there might be a little bend in the knee. Rather than pressing the left toe, or whichever foot it is lifted, towards the wall behind you, almost draw the foot in towards your pelvis, which I know doesn't sort of make much sense, but rather than stretching it away, draw it in. And as you do that, notice the rotation through the standing leg as you start to revolve the container that is your rib cage towards the side of the room with the foot that's lifted. And then maybe that hand, the top hand, comes above the top shoulder, but again, not stretching it up towards the ceiling. It's lifted, sure, but collect into the palm of the hand and then draw that actually into the shoulder joint. And balance. That's it. Make the back foot even more alive. That's it, Alex, even more alive. Good. And then maybe have a look up towards your top thumb if you've got your balance here. That's it, Heather. Lovely, Jules. My mum and dad are challenged by the balancing, I can see. At least you're giggling and not crying. Okay, brilliant. Those of you who are looking up, there's no hope, is there, for the full wing. Look down and then take a breath in, come all the way back up from here. So it doesn't matter how you end up, but we'll switch. So we'll have the other foot leading the way towards the front of your mat. I'm going to turn around so I've got my back to you. So the opposite foot now at the front of your mat. And again, feeling into the ball of the toes. The heel rests on the mat. Look at your foot and collect into it. So it's really like a lie. And then the front hand coming ahead of your front foot and off to the, well, actually, I guess now it depends on me doing it unconsciously, the right or left, depending on which side is going up. So it should be to the outer side of your mat. And then your back foot, you start to lift that away from the mat. The ball of the toes kind of guide the way. And you lift the foot no higher than hip height. Collect into that lifted hip, and then revolve the chest, the whole of, well, not just your chest, but the whole of the rib cage then, towards the side of the room of the leg that's lifted. I should have probably just got us all to go the same way, shouldn't I? And then lift that top hand if it feels okay to do so, and try and maintain your balance. Well, there you go. That's it, Jules. Well done, Alex. Good. So really focus on the breath within the rib cage. So see if you can allow the movement with the breath, not forcing the chest around or the rib cage around. Lovely. Okay, and then have a little look up if you haven't already. And then if you have now, if you are looking up but down, take a breath in. And as you breathe out, let's bring that back foot all the way back down onto the mat. And just take a moment from there. Oh, a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And then just make sure you've got space ahead of you on your mat, so you might need to move back a little bit. And then again, we'll just come onto the ball of the toes. We'll lift the heels actually, feet about hip distance apart. We'll come into a little squat. So like Utkatasana, the chair pose, so like we're sitting the buttocks down on an imaginary chair above the heels. So the thigh bones deepen back in your hip joints. It's quite strong in your thighs, like you'll feel that. Bring your hands down onto the mat, about shoulder distance apart, and bring the hands flat to the mat. And then bend your elbows as if you're going to bring your forearms down onto the mat. But just bring your upper arms, if you can, like the outer upper arms, to the inner knees. But again, just encourage that little sense of internal rotation, as if you were trying to cross the thighs. So as if you were trying to cross your thighs, but you've got your inner knees on your upper arms. And maybe some of you don't go any more than this, especially if you've got any shoulder issues. You might find it's just not great for your shoulders. but otherwise you might just tentatively take the weight off one foot, or take one foot off the mat and then the other foot off the mat. Just look forward if you can. So Bakasana, the crow pose, you really do need to bend the elbows, and you need to have that sense of drawing the inner thighs in towards one another and lifting into your sitting bones as much as you can. So try and get the sitting bones higher up towards the ceiling and look forward from there. That's it. That's it, Sally, good. And then if you've got it, just take a couple of breaths there. Well done. Before releasing your feet, back down onto the mat. And then from there, let's literally come to sit. So hands might support you as you come to sit. And let's extend or just release the right leg onto the mat ahead of you. But again, not stretching the right leg away from your torso, but it's straight. But you're still alive in your right foot. I'm just going to keep going on about feet all the time because it makes us more alive in all our joints actually. And then we'll bend the left knee if you haven't already, and the left knee going towards the left side of the mat. So we'll take Janu Shirasana. If it's not great for your knee joint, just have both feet about hip distance ahead of you. A little bit like we did in Sukhasana, you know, this pose here where we kept the aliveness in your knees. Do the same on the left side. So it's not just a matter of letting the knee sink down, but it's almost as if you're drawing the left knee in towards the midline, but at the same time it's off towards the side of the mat. Pelvis is spacious, so think about that. So space between buttocks, and just directing the sitting bones back, root of spine towards the earth. And then just sitting upright initially, and allow the weight of the rib cage to settle down towards your pelvis. And then trying to resist rounding the back. So if anything, very slowly from the root of the spine, you're just closing the space between your right side of chest, right side of tummy, right side of pelvis, and your right thigh. So rather than rounding the back and the head coming down towards the mat, it's more a sense of the front of your right side of torso, front torso, coming down, but without losing like the waist or the back of the body either. So retaining the fullness and noticing the breath. So there should still be a lightness, space for the breath. That's why we're not trying to round the back in any way. And the hands are still alive and collecting, so there's a broadness through the shoulders. Notice your breath. So Janu Shirasana. That's it. So try and keep the hands on the earth rather than take hold of your right foot, which doesn't achieve very much in terms of freedom of the spine or the breath. Just keep the hands on the earth. And just think about the tummy coming down towards the right thigh rather than the head coming towards the right shin. And then we'll take a breath in to return, and exhale, the hands can come back from there. And then we'll gather the left knee towards the center, and we'll just open into the back of the left knee as we straighten the left leg, but still retaining that connection deep in the left hip joint. We'll bend the right knee, and then right knee over towards the right side of the mat. But like we did in Sukhasana, that awareness of drawing it in towards the midline too, so it just deepens the connection in the hip joint. Okay, and then sitting bones back, spaciousness through the pelvis, hands on the mat ahead of you, collect into the center of your hands, draw the elbows a little bit in towards one another, and maybe nothing more happens, but otherwise you take a breath in. And as you breathe out, I would encourage you to close the eyes and just really move with lots of awareness, and maybe not moving very much as the tummy comes down towards the left thigh. That's it. So just keep the hands on the earth, collect into the palms of the hands. And try and keep the head really connected in as well. So don't let the head drop. Feel the fullness of the head. And see if there's any way that you can find more space within the rib cage. That's it. Well done. Lovely. Okay, so we'll take a breath in from here, returning, coming all the way back up. And then let's bring the right knee back to the center, and let's just release the right leg. And then let's bend both knees and bring the heels in towards your sitting bones, so the feet are about hip distance apart. And actually, if you just hold on to your shins with your hands initially, and just encourage that broadness to the shoulders. So feel, if you close the eyes, just imagine, I keep going on about this, like you're wearing shoulder pads and just trying to experience the shoulders bigger than they actually are, and the arms sort of not dangling as such, but held within them. And at the same time, notice sitting bones on the earth and the thigh bones deep in the hip joints, as if they were going behind you. Okay, and then a sense of the inner knees drawing in towards one another, but they're not coming in to actually touch. And almost that sense of the thighs crossing as well. So remember how that felt like to cross your thighs. And then maybe you open the eyes from here, and let's take the hands, the arms on the inside. So it's quite hard work to keep the legs like that. Take your arms on the inside of your feet and take hold of the outside of your feet. So arms on the inside of your feet, hands to the outside of the feet. And then actually you can almost encourage the inner knees in towards the outer arms. And then from there, seeing if you might bring one of your heels away from the mat, keeping the knees drawing in towards one another, and then the other heel away from the mat, still keeping the knees drawing in towards one another. So it's like the inner thighs are kind of trying to press the arms in towards one another. And see how that deepens you. Hopefully your lower back is not rounding down towards the mat, but is rounding away from the mat. And then from there, nice and slowly, seeing if you can work towards straightening the legs, but you don't need to straighten them entirely, but the knees keep drawing in towards one another. Just think about that, knees coming in, inner thighs as if they were crossing as you come into Beinspired from here. Broadness in the shoulders, not gripping. Have that internal rotation through your hip joints, inner knees coming in, remember, inner thighs coming in. Ball of toes still active. Keep deepening into your back waist. Lightness in the breath. And then on an exhalation, well done, release your feet back down onto the mat. And from there, let's come down onto our backs with the feet still about hip distance apart. But this time, when you're down on your back, bring your ball of toes quite close in towards your sitting bones. And then again, it's a sense of being alive in the knee joints and drawing, allowing the lower back to round away from the mat, so the pubic bone moves forward in space. And then as you rest the heels either side of your buttocks, okay, so rest the heels down either side of your buttocks and feel how that deepens you in your hip joint perhaps as well. And try and keep a little lift through the inner feet. And then hands down on the mat either side of your body. So actually maybe your hands make contact with your heels. Okay, so in theory, the hands and heels, just noticing that point of contact. And then from there, you might just bring your hands a little bit off to the side of your heels so that you can collect into the palms of your hands from the thumbs and the little fingers. And notice how that might make your shoulders a little broader. And then you're going to take a breath in, lift the back away from the mat, and see if you can create a little bit more space behind the back of your knees. And as you create a little bit more space behind the back of your knees, that might take you even further up onto your shoulders. Still keep collecting into your hands. That's it, Sally. Good. That's it, Katie. Keep collecting into your hands. Think about the knees coming in towards one another. Think about your inner thighs crossing. So try and encourage that internal rotation. Inner thighs coming in towards one another. Inner knees coming in towards one another. That's it. Try not to collapse in the inner ankle joints. Still be light on the ball of the toes. And then just bring your hands up towards the ceiling, like we did right at the beginning of the practice, and let the arm bones drop deeper into the shoulder joints. Keep the elbows where they are up in space as you bend them, and bring your hands either side of your ears with your fingertips as close in towards your shoulders as possible. Try not to collapse through your inner thigh. So again, think about the inner thighs crossing. Maybe you do nothing more here. Otherwise, some of you might take a breath in. Don't let the head drop, but press your hands down and lift your upper back away from the mat, still looking towards the ceiling. Come down if it's all too much, but otherwise keep looking towards the ceiling until you've come up and straighten the arms. And then you can, it's not that you're letting the head drop, you're keeping the fullness of the head connected with the heart, but you're just maybe looking towards the back wall. And then all of you coming out of whichever of those positions you're in on an exhalation, so your back comes all the way back down onto the mat. Well done, Al, that's it. Good. And just pause wherever you've been. It doesn't matter whether you were just in bridge or you went into Urdhva Dhanurasana. Just notice the breath. So eyes are closed and just rest into your breath in your lungs. And just notice the passage of the breath. Notice the tail of the breath. Where's the tail of the breath? The strands of the breath. Literally the tail of the breath as well. It's like the breath has a story to tell. Okay, wonderful, all of you. From there, let's just lift the feet away from the mat and just start to open into the back of the knee joints again. Keeping the feet and the knees forward in space away from your torso, so your lower back might round away from the mat. And connecting in with the ball of the toes. So again, you're not flexing the feet as such. There's more of an action through the ball of the toes. And then from there, just bend your left knee. And just bring your left leg down onto the mat. I mean, maybe don't have it completely straight because you want to keep that connection with the left hip joints, and maybe just keep the left knee a little bit bent, but just slide your left foot a bit further forward. Take your hands away from the sides of the body slightly and keep the hands active though, so the shoulders are active. And then we'll take a breath in, and as we breathe out, the whole container that is your torso, so your rib cage and your pelvis, keeping the spaciousness within, turning towards the left side of the room. And then maybe slowly your left foot coming down. So bend the left knee, your right foot. Keep your right knee as bent as much as possible. Right foot coming down onto the mat. So you're taking a twist, but you want the whole of your torso to move with the twist. So you want to still keep the spaciousness within your pelvis. So it might be that the right knee lifts up a little bit, the inner knee lifts up. And then you might almost kind of extend your tail behind you. And as some of you, it might be that your right foot comes up into your left hand, but not because you're pressing it into your left hand, because you're collecting the foot and the hand in towards one another and building that relationship. And it can be quite a strong, like crossing through your center when your thighs were crossing. But don't lose the spaciousness of the rib cage or the pelvis. And then we'll take a breath in and lift the right foot all the way back up towards the ceiling. And then exhaling here before inhaling the left foot up as well. So both feet up in the air with a little bend in the knees and the feet and knees forward in space. And then just release your right foot down onto the mat now. And maybe just slide the ball of the toes forward a little bit so the right leg isn't quite straight on the mat, but it's not quite a 90-degree angle at the back of the knee joint. Now think about how you're moving. So keep the legs hip distance apart. So keep that spaciousness in the pelvis as you roll towards the right side of your torso, that the whole torso kind of turns as the left foot goes towards the right side of the room. Nice and slowly, the left knee is bent. And it might be that you just keep your left foot in the air. Some of you might bring your left foot down onto the mat. Just notice how that might then lose the spaciousness of the pelvis. So you almost want to keep your tail directed back behind you and the collecting up into the back waist so everything draws into the center. And maybe it might be that your left foot goes to your right hand and your right hand towards your left foot so they collect. And there's quite a sense of that twist, I suppose. I mean, it's quite a strong twist actually, but that crossing of the thighs. So there's still that action of the thighs crossing and the internal rotation through the hips. And then on an inhalation, let's lift the left foot all the way back up towards the ceiling. And just exhale here before you inhale the right foot up again to join the left foot. And just pause with both feet up in the air, but a little bend in the knee joints and maybe the lower back rounds away from the mat. And then from there, all we're going to do on an exhalation is release the feet onto the mat. And then, believe it or not, we're going to grab whatever clothes we might want for relaxation. And we're just going to rest for a few moments, for, well, 6 minutes. So just maybe coming straight into Shavasana. But if you want to grab warmer clothes or whatever else, then doing so. But just taking this time, really important, just to let that all settle. So closing the eyes, and if you've got an eye pillow, covering your eyes with an eye pillow. But in the corpse pose, by all means have your knees bent, and yeah, great Sally, have your legs lifted up on something if you'd rather. So no effort, okay, absolutely no effort. Take a breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then just settle the awareness back with the breath in the chest, in the lungs. So awareness as deep in the lungs as possible. And not in any way controlling the breath now, but just noticing the breath, noticing your inhalation and the spaciousness of the inhalation. And noticing the release of the exhalation. And almost having a sense as you inhale, and again, you're not forcing the breath, just notice the breath. Notice the real subtlety of the breath and the real lightness of the breath, and just feel that lightness radiating throughout your body as if it's like strands of a star, like the center of the star is your lungs and then the strands away. And then the collecting of those strands back in towards the lungs on the exhalation and the release of literally that's which is no longer needed. So the inhalation centering in the lungs and like a star radiating throughout the body. And on the exhalation, just collecting back into the lungs. And at the same time, I know not all of you have been in class with me. Many of you have though, and have felt my hands on your shoulders as I channel Reiki to you. So imagine that you had my hands on your shoulders right now. And as I send you Reiki, distance Reiki, you might feel the heat on your shoulders or a softness on your shoulders. And then feel me now take my hands to the back of your skull and support the back of your skull so you can settle the weight of the skull more fully into my hands. Just noticing the body. Noticing the body and noticing your breath again. And then just beginning to bring movement back into the body. I mean, actually, you're welcome to just stay there. You don't need to move necessarily, reach and turn me off. But otherwise, just bringing movement back into the body, and maybe you want to stretch the body before rolling onto the right side as a transitionary posture almost. Just come on to the right side and let any eye pillows fall from the eyes. And then just bring yourself all the way up from there to sit in any comfortable seated position facing towards wherever you want to face towards, really. We'll collect together through the internet, and we'll just finish with the pose of humility. So literally collecting in towards one another. So maybe hands on the floor ahead of you and just bowing your head towards the earth. Doesn't need to touch the mat or anything. And then we'll bring the hands together in prayer position at the heart. And then I'll chant a single chant of Om. Should probably get you all to turn your microphones back on for this, shouldn't I? You're welcome to join me, quite literally. So let's take a breath in. And then chin towards the chest. May all beings be happy and free from suffering. And then let's just open the eyes if they're not already opened. And namaste. Thank you, all of you. Oh, that's lovely. It's lovely to be able to see some of you. Hopefully it won't be long till we're back practicing together in the flesh, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you. That's all right. That's all right. You're welcome.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was really good.
Lovely.
Oh, good. Did that work all right? Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See you all soon. I'll see you tomorrow, Chris. I'll drop that video.
Thanks, Emma.
That's all right. See you. Hi, Julie. See you soon. Dad can't work out how to turn me off. Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Barry. See you later. Can't work out how to turn the thing off either. There we go. Bye, Kaina.